The NFL scouting combine has officially begun, meaning the Texans can go out and scout some players. And not only that, free agency is a couple weeks from now, meaning there's going to be a lot of moves that the Texans are trying to make. We got a mock draft to break down for you guys in this video, as well as the free agency. What do the Texans do? And then on top of that, do you think they go out and get wide receiver on the screen, Emeka Egbuka from Ohio State? I think it's a great idea, but first things first, if you're not subbed to the channel for all the latest Texans news, this is the place to be. Be a part of the 5% of people that are subscribed, because 94% of you are not. Back to Emeka Egbuka. This is probably the all-around great wide receiver to have in the draft, right? Besides the great fit on the Texans, he is a guy that can do it all. Great route runner, great shifty ability, yards after catch. He can go up and get it. I feel like this is a great wide receiver to have on your team. And not to mention the connection from Stroud and Egbuka at Ohio State. Bring him on Houston. We've seen connections like that already with Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase. And that is just what you want to see, right? Emeka Egbuka is the receiver I want personally in the draft. The problem is, being at the number 25 spot, I would have to ask you guys, do you think it's a possibility the Texans trade up and grab him? Would you want Emeka Egbuka or the rumors to Deebo Samuel? Because honestly, I wouldn't mind both, but at the same time, you have to keep in mind the likelihood of the cap space, because I don't know how likely it is that he'll fall to 25, but I did do a mock draft, and he did say that he did fall. However, first things first, they did meet with him. They were excited to meet with him. Egbuka has talked a lot about his great connection with C.J. Stroud, and of course Marvin Harrison, Garrett Wilson also played with Stroud, but Stroud's obviously going to love the fact that Egbuka is available in the draft, and he's going to convince the Texans, hey, let's go get Egbuka. The problem is the front office is probably going to be, okay, what's best for the team? Do we need offensive line? If Egbuka's at 25, let's snag him. I'm probably under the impression the Texans will probably trade back, which is unfortunate, but at the same time, there's probably a little bit more depth in the draft. You could probably get a cornerback, you could probably get a running back, you could probably get another receiver later in the round. But Egbuka and Stroud have had such a great connection, and I mean, we've seen it already in the league that if this were to come to Houston, it would probably be one of the better connections in the league. Not only that, coming off a sophomore slump, if the Texans can get Egbuka, Deebo, and Collins, that wide receiving room would be phenomenal. And not to mention, if you get Deebo, the question's with injury, but Egbuka, Deebo can fill in the slot, and Egbuka can go in the slot. I think that's pretty perfect. However, let's look at his stats. 81 receptions, 1,000 yards, 10 touchdowns at Ohio State. A little bit of a dip from production in terms of Stroud's connection with Egbuka. But, I mean, honestly, we know the majority of how Egbuka plays, right? He's a great shifty route runner that can get open in the middle of the field and pretty much a perfect fit for what the Texans need. And that's probably the thing I would love about Egbuka is the fact that he's an all-around can do everything kind of wide receiver. He can run routes. He can catch the ball. He can go up and get it. I mean, jump ball ability. He can do it all. And I feel like out of every receiver in the draft class, he is probably the most well-rounded. You have Tetero and McMillan, a guy who can do it as well. He's just a little taller, but I think Egbuka is a little shiftier. So there's a good receiver class, regardless if you can get Tez Johnson, Matthew Golden, if somebody falls through the cracks all the way down to 25. My fear is the Steelers are probably going to take him before us, and that leads me to my mock draft for you guys, and it was a fun one. I don't know how Emeka Egbuka fell to 25, but there was no wide receiver taken in the first 11 picks. McMillan went to the Cowboys, Luther Burden to the Falcons, and then Matthew Golden to the Broncos. The Steelers took Josh Simmons, which another guy out of Ohio State that I thought the Texans would consider is if Simmons falls, big tackle, taller guy. So very different options the Texans can go with, right? I feel like if Egbuka somehow, some way, it's very unlikely this happens, but if he does fall to 25, that's where you have to pull the trigger. It just makes the most sense. And I don't think the Texans are going to be that aggressive in trading up because they're probably going to trade for a wide receiver in Deebo Samuel. And I don't even hate that. I feel like if you do stack up on receiver, maybe you dump Schultz's contract and you bring in a veteran tight end. You definitely need two tight ends to block in terms of how Nick Caley wants to run this offense for the Texans. But looking at this mock draft, I feel like it's almost an impossible situation that Egbuka does fall to 25. Somehow he did in this draft. Genty went to the Raiders. The quarterback, we'll see how the whole draft kind of falls into place. However, the Texans need a lot of depth at a lot of different positions. D-tackle, secondary, maybe another linebacker. I feel like linebacker is pretty solid with Harris. You have Alshire and I'm blanking on another guy, but we have three solid linebackers. It's there if Harris can stay healthy. And then wide receiving core is the biggest need. Tight end. I really don't understand Schultz's contract because he's getting $15 million in the cap hit, which is probably the biggest problem. But overall, I mean, when you're looking at what do the Texans do in the draft, there's a lot of different things. And this is the problem, which why I don't like doing mock drafts, is because free agency hasn't even happened yet. And I would love to look to the draft and say the Texans are going to go get Egbuka, the Texans are going to go trade for Debo. But what's most likely right now is the Texans are probably going to get a low-end number 2 wide receiver to pair with Nico Collins, which is a good idea. And then in the draft, they're probably going to trade back or go with a Josh Simmons or a tackle because they need a tackle. And if Titus Howard is going to move inside to play that left guard or right guard position, you're most likely going to need another right tackle because of the rookie. Blake Fisher last year did not do too well at that spot. Now, I would rather Titus Howard go to right tackle and fill up the guards because there's a lot of guards in free agency. But still, just talking about the Texans' needs as a whole, there's so many different things that they can do, and there's so many different needs that they have. They can very well be the Cowboys of last year's offseason, just roll over and say, we don't have enough money, we don't do anything. But I don't believe that. Nick Caserio is such a good general manager that he's going to make a move. The question is, what do they do? Right now, it looks like they're interested in Deebo Samuel. Emeka Egbuka in the draft might seem unlikely, but it's probably the best bet, the best good idea in terms of the connection that Stroud and Egbuka had at college that could easily translate to the NFL. So, just a lot to look forward to for the Texans offseason. I want to do a quick recap of a mock draft, potential mock draft for the Texans. Maybe Tez Johnson falls at 25. Maybe the Texans trade back in the second. I don't actually know. I don't think anybody knows. It's just a matter of reports here in the news. And where does the Texans go? That didn't even make sense. But to me, right now, what I'm looking at, and I've thought about it for a while, and if I was the GM, if I was Nick Caserio, no digs. I would agree with that. You go get a guard like Kevin Zeitler or somebody who's just a veteran that can fill the role for this year because you're not going to get somebody for long term like Trey Smith who's already locked up. And you need to get a guard. And my first order of business is to get a guard, cut Shaq Mason, and get rid of Dalton Schultz's contract. Bring in a veteran tight end like a Tyler Higbee. I know he's under contract, but somebody of that caliber who is a big tight end who could block, maybe a Colby Parkinson, somebody who could do the job. Because I feel like Schultz, as much money as he's getting, you could give that to somebody else. Schultz is a good target, but they barely utilized him last year. It only felt like he was the main target when Nico Collins went down. So if you're going to go after Deebo Samuel and then potentially maybe Emeka Egbuka in the draft, dump Schultz's contract, try and get a tackle, a guard, just somebody, because looking at it right now, it's definitely a difficult situation. The Texans would love Egbuka. They definitely should reunite him. But there's a lot of question marks as to who do the Texans get in free agency. They don't have a lot of money. They don't have a good offensive line. They don't have a lot of receivers. They need some depth on defense. And we'll look ahead the next year. And I was actually a little surprised they fired Bobby Slowick, but it was the right call. And a lot of people are skeptical about it in terms of the non-Texans fans. Everyone's like, Bobby Slowick was pretty good. Yeah, but when he calls plays that took 8 years to develop and you don't have a good offensive line, that's where the problem happens. So, Emeka Egbuka has been linked to the Texans forever. But they finally met with him, and that's just the order of business you have to do is find out what it looks like for this offseason. And we'll keep you guys updated throughout every day. Free agency, only 12 days away. It's going to be a fun time. So Thank you everyone so much for watching. Appreciate the support. Hit that sub button if you're new. And let me know any ideas. Comment down below if you like Egbuka, Debo, all the rumors that we're hearing about this team. Let me know what you think, as well as where do they go for future options. So it's going to be a fun free agency, but thank you for watching, and we'll catch you in the next episode.